there were a couple of guys back in the early 60s who were alcoholics. And they were very good friends. And one day they said to each other, why don't we go to Santa Barbara and cool out for the summer and see if we can't dry out? So they went down there. And all day long they visited with each other and had a wonderful time. But in the evening, they would kind of drift away from each other and go out and drink in secret, while talking how sober they were in the daytime. Well, eventually, something happened that bared the truth, and they had days they celebrated in their cult that they developed, and one of them was called the Great Cop-Out. And that was the day they admitted to each other that they were sneaking away and drinking at night. And they then pledged that they would never lie to each other again after the Great Cop-Out. They said, this is just crazy. This alcohol is killing us, and we're being dishonest with each other. Good friends, we're helping each other kill ourselves. So that was then celebrated later as the Great Cop-Out. Well, they also, then growing out of that, they developed the concept of radical honesty. And as this began to work with each other, somehow or another, they recruited some other people to join them. And the word traveled fast. And the first thing you know, they had heroin addicts coming and seeking them out to try this new miraculous procedure to cure yourself of mental problems, alcohol, and drugs. And so they would get in a circle and talk with each other. And some of these sessions were marathon, but they had a set of rules they developed. And one of them was, if you think somebody is bullshitting, you call them on it in their face. That's bullshit. That's not true what you're saying. We can tell it's not true because of this and that. So then this was beginning to be so successful, they decided to move the camp to San Francisco when they found a place in a warehouse where they could meet. Well, they were helping addicts like crazy, but then it was so successful, somebody said, why don't you offer this up to people who are imperfect but not addicted? So then they named it Square Games. They let have Synanon games populated by squares. And Judy heard about that, and she said, I want to go try that. So she did, and she was immediately hooked on it, loved it. And she would go there at 6 o'clock after working all day as a speech therapist. And I would brace myself at home, knowing that she was going to get home after midnight. Frequently it was 2 or later, and once a week. And when she'd get home, she had to ventilate what she'd been experiencing all evening and into the wee hours. And I knew that part of that would be involving some anger. And she'd come home and I would have napped. But I'd wake up and stir and be there ready to talk. And she'd start, they say I'm angry. I'm not angry, am I? No, dear, you are. Well, sometimes maybe a little. And then, and she'd get pissed off that I'd said that. Well, one of the things she'd tell me that happened at these things, well, they won't let me talk about you and the things you do that really upset me because you're not there to defend yourself. And that was one of their rules. You can't talk about anybody else unless they're there in the circle. And I don't know what all they talked about, but they talked and they talked. And what pounded in was being open and honest. And as Judy got deeper into this. She loved it the whole time, by the way, although it upset her to beat hell to be told what you're saying sounds like bullshit. You're making that. Anyway, she told me, well, after I'd been in this a while, I realized when I was growing up, telling the truth was just not a subject of interest. It was all about what will the community think? They were all involved in 4-H. All seven, her and her 6 siblings, were practically taking over the county fair with all of their displays in entomology and cooking and forestry and animals and showing animals and all that. And these 7 kids were just sweeping the blue ribbons, and some of the people in the community were getting a little bit like, isn't that an awful lot for the Merses? But they got community acknowledgement and recognition and praise. And so at home, it was, she said, it was all about what will the community think? Not anything about, well, that might not be truthful. I, on the other hand, have been raised by a lawyer who was also had been a prosecuting attorney. And by the time we were having these troubles in our marriage, he'd been a judge for 5.5 years and able to sit up higher and look down on people and say, that doesn't sound truthful to me. Are you lying? And her family was too pragmatic about being accurate with the things they said. But in my family, there was this judgmental fierceness of calling people liars and things like that. But I think somewhere along there, with all of her Synanon square games, she sort of figured it out that if she was going to make it in a long-term marriage with me, she was probably going to have to meet me somewhere near the middle on being truthful. And she did. She became one of the most accurate reporters of anybody I've ever known. And she wasn't a hair shirt about it, but she just was frank. Now, I mentioned this yesterday, and my sister said, well, but she was into confronting people. Well, I guess there was some of that. She would tell people, well, I don't think you ought to have more than 2 children. She was a zero population growth person. And she would be pretty blunt about that. But she was also Swiss. And Swiss people have a reputation of being good at mediating and diplomacy. Not being big enough to have an army. So when she became a Metro Councilor and then the president of the Metro Councilor, she was a master mediator and diplomat. But she was also fiercely truthful. So thank you, Synanon. Thank you, all the people that participated in it with Judy. And thank you, Judy, for finding it and learning those skills and telling me about it, even though it was sometimes 3 or 4 in the morning.